In Australia, we are crushing the coronavirus pandemic, but as you know, we've had to shut down large parts of the economy to do that, and unsurprisingly, that's pushed our GDP backwards. The figures for the March quarter showed we shrunk by 0.3% over that period, a tiny step backwards by global standards, but given the quarter we're in now is bound to be much worse, we are certain to have 2 quarters of a shrinking economy in a row. And that means we're dealing with the R word.
Is Australia in recession today?
Well, the answer to that is yes.
Yep, it won't be official till we see the quarters for this month, this quarter, in 3 months' time. And we might have dodged economic Armageddon, as the Treasurer has claimed, but we are living through our first recession since Paul Keating said this in 1990.
The accounts do show that Australia is in a recession. The most important thing about that is that this is a recession that Australia had to have.
The 2020 recession is the one we couldn't dodge, the one nobody saw coming, the economic blow that came in the form of a virus from China. The biggest blow to our national accounts has come from a massive drop in consumption, in household spending. We've spent big on a few things like groceries, grog and office supplies, but spending at restaurants, pubs, gyms, retail stores and the like has plummeted, largely because most of them have been shut. So there's no doubt we're doing better than most of the world.
The OECD average is more than 6 times what we've seen in Australia. So the average fall across the OECD is 6 times what we've seen here in Australia. The United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, France at nearly 6%, Italy and then, of course, China at 9.8%.
Now, the big question is what happens in the spring, the September quarter. Will we bounce right back out of recession? Is that possible? It'd surely demand a smooth reopening of the economy. It'd demand a lot of spending by government and confident consumer spending from us. And surely it won't happen unless state governments speed up the relaxation of their restrictions, including opening up their borders. And an even trickier bit, but it also won't happen unless we keep a lid on infections and make sure we don't have a major second wave. That, of course, would undo all of our good work. To get the latest on the economy and all of this, I'm joined by the Chief Economist at Deloitte Access Economics, Chris Richardson. Thanks for joining us, Chris. Wonder if, first up, I could get your best estimate about that September quarter. Do we do 2 quarters with a shrinking economy, and is it possible to bounce back straight out of that?
Yeah, bad news in the last handful of months. Terrible news, as we know right now. Those lockdowns mean recession, and a fairly large recession. After that, though, you've got it exactly right, Chris. If we can keep the virus at bay, Australia is superbly positioned to bounce back. So far, our hit to the economy has been smaller than elsewhere, and because we've done so well against the virus, we look in reasonable shape as state and eventually international borders open up to bounce back really quite strongly.
What about the global economy, though? Because so many other countries have been hit worse than us, their economies have been hit worse as well. They'll take longer to recover. Are those external factors going to still have a big impact on our economy?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And there's 2 sets of problems there. It says the world economy will be much sicker than the Australian economy. That will hurt us. You know, we trade with the world, and that's going to have an impact here. But it has a double impact, because we've done better against the virus than most other nations around the world. That also says we have to be more careful as we open international borders. And so it's going to be some time before we have the tourists, before we have the students, before we have the migrants. So, even as 8 states and territories go through their 3 stages of opening up, even after all that, there will still be an ongoing challenge for the Australian economy.
Yeah, that's a big challenge for governments in the medium term. If we continue to keep the virus at bay and there is no vaccine and the rest of the world's sort of been through it, we're going to be an isolated country for a long time to come, which I suppose is one of the reasons, and also the desire to get out of recession as quickly as possible, the government is spending so much on stimulus. When they're talking about a housing industry stimulus, the details to be announced soon, and also economic reform, industrial relations reform and these sorts of things, none of these are really going to help in the short term, are they? They are more medium-term changes.
Look, things like that housing package can help in the shorter term. The reforms are more medium term. And so those two things are a good example of the two broad needs from government at the moment. You need governments to keep going hard, and you need them to go smart. Go hard is, sure, we need to get out of the emergency support. That will increasingly be less necessary as time goes by. But we'll need to transition out, and we'll need to keep doing other things, whether it's a housing package or infrastructure to drive unemployment down. That's the go hard element of the equation. Go smart, as you say, it's more medium term if it's in industrial relations or other reforms, but we should do it. We know that unemployment goes up fast, it comes down slow, and that combination says if we can get some reforms, that will allow the Australian economy to grow faster over the medium term, which means more job creation.
And Chris, we don't really know the true state of the Australian federal budget. The budget's been delayed to October. Should we be given more information, a better insight from the government into what they think the situation is now, or is it just too volatile and we won't really get a good handle on it until close to the budget?
Look, it will be a while before we get a good handle. What I do think the government needs to do, so it's being entirely sensible. It's saying it's going to have a look at JobKeeper and everything else, and today it changed the date when it might be getting back with some more detail around what it's doing there. That's fine. But it does need to give Australian businesses, Australian families, a feel for where it goes from here. Broadly, it needs to say, we still have your back. The emergency measures, some of them will become less important over time. We'll be drawing some of those back, but we'll be putting other things in place. You've got to get that confidence back. That's something the Reserve Bank governor's been talking about. You can see it internationally. The nations that are less anxious, the nations that are more confident, are the ones that are already starting to bounce back more strongly. That will be an important part of the equation.
Thanks for joining us again, Chris.